Welcome to Bankruptcy, Through the Looking Glass, with Barry Levine.
Welcome back to Bankruptcy Through the Looking Glass with Barry Levine. Barry is a Massachusetts bankruptcy attorney with more than 4 decades of experience helping individuals and small business owners get through difficult financial situations with clarity and common sense. I'm your host, Evan Mack, and today we're talking about the 341 meeting of creditors, the part of the bankruptcy process that sounds intimidating, but usually isn't. Barry Levine, sir, welcome back.
Every time I hear that over 4 decades, when I tell clients that I know most of the trustees for 45 years.
Listen, you're seasoned, Barry Levine. You're seasoned. You've been in the game. You know what I mean?
It's depressing. So 341 meetings, one of my favorite things. Usually I'd be wearing an I Saw Jerry t-shirt. Today this is what I'd be wearing today to the 341 meeting, and my client would be sitting behind me. And, we don't get into the ritual sacrifice, but the 341 meeting itself is, it's the anxiety of the unknown. It's really not bad.
So what is it? Why does it, happen in every bankruptcy case? What is a 341 meeting?
Okay, when you file a bankruptcy, if I filed your bankruptcy today, 30 days from now, the court would schedule your Section 341 meeting, and ostensibly a meeting of creditors. When the notice of the filing of your case goes out, if you're filing a Chapter 7, it's going to tell your creditors that this is an assetless case. Basically, don't call us, we'll call you. And it has been decades since a creditor has shown up at a 341 meeting. You may have some local garage guy who has a hard-on for you or something, but the institutional creditors, Amex, you never see them. It just doesn't happen. I think that the Chapter 7 trustees, I don't know if you know what the word plots means. In Yiddish, it's like drop dead. Mm-hmm. Would drop dead if a creditor showed up at one of those meetings. So, and the other thing is, so your meeting would be 30 days from now. And as I was saying before, the Chapter 7 trustees in an assetless case, because that's what the notice will say, they get paid $60. They don't tend to spend a lot of time. In fact, unless you're early in the calendar, the wait is probably longer than the meeting itself. And what the meeting is calculated to do is ask you the same shit you've already answered under oath, again, under oath. I mean, they ask the same questions about your assets that are listed in your schedules and things along those lines. It's nothing that daunting. Generally, the 3 initial questions after they identify you and swear you in, they'll ask you, did you review the paperwork? Is it true and accurate? And are there any changes that you want to make? And then they'll ask about real estate, things like that. It's really, the anxiety is worse than the reality.
So Barry, who's typically in the room for these meetings besides you and someone else?
Well, right now, if what we're looking at now would be the 341 meeting, the screen would be filled with other dators, their attorneys, and the Chapter 7 trustee. That would be before me. And like I said, my client would be sitting behind me. We'd both be on the screen. Generally, that you're supposed to black your screen out and all that other stuff. But the very interesting thing about 341 meetings is you get to see technology in action with all kinds of people. So, but it's really it's not that unpleasant.
So in this is this a courtroom setting, or is this something like more informal than people expect?
No, it's the trustee is sitting in his office. They have some sort of set which shows the U.S. attorneys. You can make a thing behind you, to make it look professional, just like me. And and that's it. He's sitting there. Occasionally he fades out because he cuts in front of his own camera, and he asks the questions. And if creditors happen to show up, which occasionally will occur, let's say a developer files bankruptcy and leaves a lot of people out a lot of money or something like that. So, the trustee can limit the inquiry that creditors make because you're entitled as a creditor if you show up to ask questions, but you're not entitled to take up 3 days worth of time. So it's really he controls things, and like I said, that happens very rarely that creditors show up especially in a Chapter 7.
So Barry, what kind of questions does the trustee usually ask?
Well, they'll ask things like, how did you come up with the value of the real estate? Here's the appraisal. Do you have a homestead? Here's a copy of the homestead. Here's the blue book values of the cars and the loans against them. If you're running a business, they may ask you questions about business. But like I said, generally, all your interests and assets are listed on your schedules. If you own your own business, whether it's an LLC or a corporation, that would be listed someplace. So it has to do with everything that like I said, it's very repetitive. Some of the trustees will actually read into the record what you've listed as assets, your
Mm.
schedule A and B. Matter of public record, no need to do it, but why not read it into the record?
So Barry, do creditors really show up? And if they do, what are they allowed to ask?
Well, they could rarely do creditors if ever show up. Like I said, it would be normally a case of maybe a contractor or a developer stiffed a lot of people and things like that. So they all come out and ask questions. But generally, the trustees try to limit the inquiry to things having to do with finding assets. The story of how the debt came about is really not anybody's business.
Hmm.
But very often the trustees have difficulty limiting those questions, and you can wind up listening and sitting through a lot of questions that are irrelevant into the bankruptcy scheme of things, but they're allowed to ask.
Yeah, but Barry, how long do these meetings usually last in your experience? You know what I mean? What tends to surprise people about these?
For one debtor,
Oh, well, damn.
the it's the time um, you sit waiting. If your case is not at 9 o'clock, your 9:30 may first be heard at 10, and your 10 may be heard at 11. As the day backs up, the lag gets worse.
Hmm, mhm.
I've
What
had some days spent 2.5 hours on Zoom with 341 meetings.
what happens if someone forgets a document or, gives an incomplete answer during this short meeting?
Well, the trustees listen. The one thing about bankruptcy is if you forgot to send the trustee a copy of your homestead, they'll let you send them a copy. If you, uh, you know, didn't provide them, most of this stuff is beyond me why you wouldn't provide them, but things happen. Uh, the only thing the trustees get very picky about is because you have to provide proof of ID.
Mhm.
That's when they really, if you haven't done that, may not even hold the meeting. But very often, even nowadays, if for some reason a client is unavailable or I can't make a 341 meeting, the trustees will schedule it for the next available date. So it's none of it is the end of the world.
Mm. But Barry, can you walk us through one of the, maybe through all your experiences, a memorable 341 meeting from your practice, one that shows the process, or maybe someone nervous going in, anything that sticks out in your mind?
Well, I can tell you, I represented this woman who was in the back when you can sell minutes, phone minutes
Yeah.
were a popular commodity. And I don't know, she had a business. She was selling minutes from this one to that one. And, she made a quarter penny and she was in a bankruptcy. But a couple of creditors showed up, a brother and sister. She was dressed like Little Bo Peep and he was in a sailor's outfit. And I eventually had to tell their attorney that I had a train to catch and left. But most of them, it's, you find that, like I wasn't my 341 meeting, but a gentleman who had been indicted was busy sort of giving testimony when he probably should have been taking the Fifth Amendment. And I will say I've had a few clients who have taken the Fifth Amendment, and it does throw the trustees off their game, but they're entitled to. There was a gentleman many decades ago. He was building houses on the Cape, and he had a friend at the bank who would advance on loans on properties that were built. Trees were still on the lot. And ultimately, he went bankrupt and he went to jail and he took the Fifth Amendment at his 341 meeting. Pity I don't like the Cape. I could have got a good piece of property back.
But Barry, after the 341 meeting is over, what happens next in the person's case?
It's a matter of wait. Like I said, if we filed your bankruptcy today and the court is very good on these things, you'd get your discharge 4 months from now. So what's it, February, March, April, May? I'd be in a T-shirt and shorts. And it's just a matter of creditors have a certain amount of time to file complaints objecting to your discharge. But that's very rare. And you'd know about it in advance. And in this debtor's counsel's opinion, filing a complaint objecting to discharge is still not going to get the creditor its money. But that's a story for another day. But otherwise, there's a second course that they need to take. I don't know if I mentioned this, the first course that they take. We now have them take that second course when we file their petition, because what then happens is when the trustee reports their case as an assetless case, now they're ready to get their discharge. And, I think it's 2 months from their 341 meeting, they get their discharge. So it's just a matter of hurry up and wait. From a debtor's point of view, really the significant date is when they file their case, because that freezes everything in place.
Barry Levine, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Hey, my pleasure. What else is there to do on a snowy day in Massachusetts?
Listen, guys, thank you for tuning in to Bankruptcy Through the Looking Glass with my man, Barry Levine. If you'd like to learn more or connect with Barry directly, visit levinslaw.com. And if this episode helped make the process feel a little less intimidating, be sure to leave a review, and subscribe to the show. And we will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on this enlightening journey through bankruptcy. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.